So the care and maintenance of tomatoes as I grow, these happen to be some indeterminate tomatoes. In this case, I have them strung up, but there's a few things with indeterminate tomatoes that I do twice a day and to help with them pollinating. If you're outside and you have breezes and you have winds and that type of a thing, you don't really have to worry about doing this. I still always wanted to, for the determinate tomatoes, I always pound the posts, and with the indeterminate tomatoes, I always wanted to shake them, shake my string, and that giving that little vibration, and that's all you got to do, because when you shake one, you're actually on the system of the cable that runs across, actually does a little shaking of all of them. So twice a day I want to go in here as I'm checking for ripe tomatoes and that type of a thing. I'll go ahead and I'll shake my strings and get a little pollination going on here in the greenhouse. If you have a lot of wind and a lot of breeze, you really don't have to worry about it. But there's once a week I always do this one task. And that task is I need to make sure that I put on my tomato clips as my tomatoes are growing, and I want to also sucker and figure out what the suckers are. Let me show you one, because I know I had a subscriber that said they were a beginner and they really wanted to see the sucker and what I'm referring to. Let me see what I can do here to show you that. I'm going to get my hand here now so you can see. We have here our leader that's wanting to climb up, and on this leader you'll notice that I have some young fruit at that stage right there. See the little, they're not even blooming, they're nothing, they're just young little fruit. What's below that fruit is going to be your sucker, and I'm going to come here, make sure you see that. I'm trying to look at the camera while I'm doing it, but this guy right there is your sucker, and if it's an indeterminate, let the sucker go. But in this case, or if it's a determinant, let it go. But this is an indeterminate variety. So I'm just going to come up here and pinch that, because I don't want another leader. See how I have the fruit above, and then it's going to continue to climb. This is my leader right there. And in question, I have another one here I'm going to show you. That'll be a little bit better to see. Let me raise it up. Get my hand here so I can identify. Yeah, I think this will work right here. See here on this tomato plant, you see how I had the fruit right here, the future fruit, the flowers, and down here in the notch of the tomato we have a sucker there, and we have one that's quite a bit bigger right there. I don't want 2 liters, 3 liters. I want 1 liter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch that sucker as well, and it won't hurt the tomato plant. As a matter of fact, what it'll do is it'll help you have bigger fruit, bigger fruit, and it's easier for you to you don't need to string up quite as much. So now that I have my fruit, I'll go and keep using this. I'll go ahead and put a clip here just below the limb and above that fruit, but that'll help support that tomato plant, and I'm going to continue doing that all through the greenhouse here, and I think we can get quite a few of them showing. I'll take it down to about there. So I'm just going to go through here on each one of these tomato plants, and I'm going to add a clip where I think it'll offer a little bit of support. Whoop, that clip broke. That happens. They're not good but for a couple of years. I'll make sure I can see. They're not good but for a couple of years, and so you'll have to get plenty of tomato clips to take care of that. So let's keep going here. Looking at the next plant, I have a big sucker right here. Here's my leader with my fruit, and right below it in the crotch of a limb and the main leader, I have myself a sucker growing. And you always want to go back. There was a little one just a second ago too. So you're always going to want to go back and look. Don't just look up high, but also look down low to see if you have some other plants that are other suckers that are growing. So we'll keep going here. We want to make sure when we put these clips on, I know I said this in another video, but in case you haven't seen that video, you want to make sure you put the clip on to where the flower of the fruit will not actually fall inside of this, because it will want to grow inside of the inside of your clip. So you'll have a deformed tomato, and it'll be unusable, or as far as the terms of marketability, it'll look funny. So we'll keep going here, and you just got to do this at least once a week in your greenhouse. If you have rapid growth, such as you get at the beginning of the season when the plants are small, you may want to clip them twice a week, because they're pretty weak. They have a pretty weak vine at that stage, and they're just shooting up and growing like crazy. So right now I'm at the stage where once a week I can do my clipping, and eventually I'll be lowering these, such as I'm going to be doing on the cucumbers. That they'll need to be lowered now. They're getting up there to where they're going to have to start dropping. So we'll keep going. All right, folks, I'm all finished in here in the small greenhouse with the determinant tomatoes. Let's go next door to the larger greenhouse where we're full of determinant tomatoes, such as Florida 91s. We have Red Deuce, Red Defender, Mountain Spring, and those tomatoes are starting to kind of cascade into my aisleway. We need to get them under control. I do this about once a week to once every 2 weeks to keep them under control. Now in that house with the determinants, we don't want to sucker those. We're going to let everything thrive, because we get primarily just one good crop out of them. If you allow them to grow a little bit longer, they'll turn right around and give you a few more tomatoes, but nothing like the first batch. So let's go into the greenhouse and deal with the determinant tomato. I'm in here in our big greenhouse, the 30 by 72, and we have determinant tomatoes in here, and we're doing somewhat of a Florida weave, not exactly, but every day, twice a day, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, I want to go ahead and pop the, because the strings are on here, when you pop them, you'll see the tomatoes will actually move, and that helps actually with the pollination, kind of gets the pollen down on the tomatoes, and that way we can get more tomatoes. So let me go ahead and do that. Now that I've gone through and tapped all of my T-posts here in the greenhouse, I want to go ahead, and I got some tomatoes that are actually getting too big as far as hanging out over the string. I kind of like to delay my Florida weave type of a deal. I don't really weave them like I used to. I go with four plants between each T-post. And what that does is, when I go around, I just go onto the side, pick up the hanging over tomatoes, and go around the next T-post. What I like about that is I can turn right around, and it's easier for me to go in and grab a tomato, but you have to let the plants actually get a little hanging over into the aisleway in order to do that, and then you'll pick them up and cinch them up, and you'll gain your aisleway back. So let me go ahead and I'll show you just exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to be working close to the camera. I don't have enough room to show you my start, but we'll show you what I'm doing here, and I'll work towards you. I'll move the camera and I'll work towards you, and that way maybe perhaps you can see a little bit better. But when you start getting into the heavy ones, such as this, and I'm just trying to find my spacing here, and you just do one loop and you give a good pull using a piece of PVC pipe as your extension. And like I said, you just go down, and what I'll end up doing is, after I go down, I'll just go around the last one a couple loops, and I'll work it from the back side, cinching up all of my tomatoes. And this is Mountain Spring tomatoes that we're dealing with right here. And then I always try to move my plants a little bit here to make sure I don't have any tomatoes that are getting caught in the string. I want them to keep growing, right? That's the only thing that I'll say by being behind the cinching. There we go. It there's one that's wanting to get caught. There we go. Being behind the cinching actually hurts because they really grow up around it. Once you get to the end, all you really do is go around your pipe, your T-post a couple of times. There we go. And then we're going to work it from the back side, tightening up the other side. Now these, I was gone last week, so these have grown enough. I'm going to go ahead and add another layer, another level, because they have just taken off so well. That way I have my tomatoes more under control than I did. But I do like letting them grow a little bit longer. And you come back in a day and they'll all be cinched up just as pretty as you can please. Now I like having my string. It's a little bit of a pain, but I like having my, instead of me carrying, I can carry that box on my belt loop, but I really don't mind it getting caught a little bit as I go through the line. I just leave it in the center aisle, and that way what I do is I'll do this side and I'll do this row too. So it all works out pretty good for me. And when you get to the end, well, you've used up the excess string you laid out. So we'll keep going here. Now my rows look a lot better. They're tight, they're brought back up, they're a little bit more under control. After I've gotten my strings put on, I'll actually walk on back. We have, I don't know, around 500 tomatoes in this house, 450, something like that, and other house. But when I get done putting the strings up, and the way I do it, by allowing the plants to kind of overgrow a little bit, and then I kind of recapture them, I just take a second to make sure that my plants are all the way in, and I go ahead and tuck a few of them in, make sure they're secured as I go down the row. And like this one here is a pretty long, these are, and by the way, these are determinant tomatoes, or determinant tomatoes. So these determinants, I want them to continue, I'll let them sucker out and that type of thing. So I'll find like this guy's hanging behind, and I think this is what gets a lot of people, where it kind of bothers them a little bit. They have a hard time getting their tomatoes inside. So I'd look for opportunities here to go ahead and make sure they're behind the strings. And if I can, I'll take if it wants to be hanging a little bit, I'll lift it gently, and I'll actually stick one of their leaf limbs out, and then help to support the plant to make sure it continues to grow up, giving Delia and I a great walkway here to still harvest the tomatoes as we go down. So just being gentle. You know, they're a little bit flexible, but they're not. It's not like they're not breakable. But just take a second, go on down. Like here's a small one that's wanting to stick out. I'll show you this. It's got a small tomato on it. Let me bring this over to you. Now this small tomato, you see where it's wanting to hang out. We have a leader, and I barely caught it with my string. I'll actually just go ahead here, being gentle, and I'll try to find a way for it to go underneath of more of the strings. And I don't have to do this every day. I just do it the one day a week. And now I pulled it out over the top. That tomato now will go ahead and continue growing, and we have it under control. And I hope this kind of information helps you gain control of your tomatoes. So I'll continue going down my rows after I put the string on, and I'll make sure that I have my tomatoes securely in there, kind of free up some of them. You don't have to do this. The tomatoes will continue to grow. That part I understand. But at the same token I think it makes it easier to make sure that I have everything balanced inside of the baskets that I created to make sure I have a walkway to walk down here. It's a lot better in this walkway now than it once was. The determinant tomatoes are growing all over. They have all these suckers that are growing at one time, so I don't have to worry about them growing vertically too much. They're going to be topping out here pretty soon in the greenhouse, and we're going to be just had a massive fruit set, giving us a lot of tomatoes for the garden. Make sure that with determinant tomatoes, don't overextend the number of stakes that you use. I like metal T-posts. 5.5 foot are great. That's like the perfect size, which these are some from my farm that are just too tall really for doing this, but it isn't going to hurt anything. It isn't going to hurt anything. You just got to go over the top a little higher. But a 5 to 5.5 foot T-post for most determinant tomatoes is high enough to do your basket weave, your Florida weave. And the thing I'll say is you can be too aggressive on putting up string to where you have such a narrow area to where from one string to the next, well, it'll be hard to harvest out the tomatoes if you're too aggressive with it. They're going to get pinched in between the strings. So let it go a little bit. Let them grow. Let them kind of do like a bouquet the way it was showing originally, and then bring them back in, giving your aisleway back. This happens to be a 4-foot aisleway, 24-inch plants. That's where I'm at on this one. 5 foot's fine. It just depends on how much you want to maximize your space. If you have the space, give them 5 foot between the rows, giving you a little bit more room to work. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll keep going here. And like always, if you like this kind of information, hit that like and subscribe button. It means a lot to Delia and I. It helps with the algorithm, and it helps us grow our channel. Thanks a lot, and come grow with us.